Overhead electrical power lines are the silent killers. The leading cause of fatal electrical incidents while on the job is contact with power lines. Power lines kill an average of 133 workers every year, and half of these workers are between ages of 25 to 35. Most of the time, the leading causes are contact with heavy equipment, cranes, drilling rigs, backhoes, dump trucks, etc. Contact with long-handled tools and hand-carried items such as ladders, scaffolds, metal siding, metal poles, etc. Have a look. 3 people were killed at a concrete plant when a crane struck a 7,200 volts electrical power line. The crane operator was electrocuted immediately, and 2 co-workers were themselves electrocuted when they attempted to rescue the crane operator. Within seconds, 3 fatalities. If you are a dump truck driver, you must be aware of overhead electrical power lines. On September 21, 2005, at the Hanford Central Waste Complex, the raised bed of dump truck operated by a subcontractor hit an energized 240-volt power line, producing an electrical arc as the line was severed. The driver exited the truck without waiting for verification that the line was de-energized but was not injured. Dear friends and fellows, you are on the platform of Safety First Life. Today, we are going to discuss the hazards and the risks involved with overhead power lines, how we can avoid incidents and accidents with respect to overhead power lines, what safety precautions are needed, and what control measures can be implemented practically on the work site. So, without wasting time, let's get started. Dear friends and fellows, if you are working near or below the overhead power lines, what you need to know. This is the most important and the basic question. Accidental contact with live overhead power lines kills people and causes many serious injuries every year. People are also harmed when a person or object gets too close to a line and a flashover occurs. Work involving high vehicles or long equipment is particularly high risk, such as in construction, lorry-mounted cranes such as HIAPs, mobile elevated work platforms, MEWP, scaffold poles, tipper vehicles, cranes, and ladders, etc. And if you are an employee of agriculture department, there combines sprayer booms, material handlers, tipper vehicles, ladders, and irrigation pipes. They might contact with overhead power lines, and there is the possibility of a catastrophic accident. Remember, going close to a live overhead line can result in a flashover that may kill. Touching a power line is not necessary for danger. Voltages lower than 230 volts can kill and injure people. Don't mistake overhead power lines on wooden poles for telephone wires, and electricity can bypass wood, plastic, or rubber. If it is dumb or dirty and cause fatal shocks, don't rely on gloves or rubber boots to protect you. It is useless in some cases. So be cautious and well informed. If you know what are the dangers, what are the risks, then the second important question is you must understand what you need to do then. Dear friends and fellows, you are on the platform of Safety First Life. If you are first time on this channel, kindly subscribe it and press the bell icon for all future notifications. And if you find the video informative, then like, comment and share it with your friends and fellows. After knowing the risks and hazards with respect to overhead power lines in your work area, in your construction site, then you need to plan and manage work near electric overhead power lines so that risks from accidental contact or close proximity to the lines are adequately controlled. Safety precautions will depend on the nature of the work and will be essential even when work near the line is of short duration. Safety can be achieved by a combination of measures such as planning and preparation, eliminating the danger, controlling the access, and controlling the work. The first important point is you need to make planning and preparation. But how? Let us understand how to plan and prepare the work site. This is the first step to find out whether there is any overhead power line within or immediately next to the work area or across any access route. Information will be available from the local electricity supplier, service provider, or the utility owner. If any overhead lines are found, you must assume that they are live unless proved otherwise by their owners. If there are any overhead lines over the work area, near the site boundaries, or over access roads to the work area, consult the utility owner so that the proposed plan of work can be discussed. Allow sufficient time for lines to be diverted or made dead or to implement other safety precautions needed to work safely. What you need to do now, walk down and survey the work site thoroughly before beginning the work to identify all overhead power lines. Consider equipment, travel paths, and movement. But how? By looking up. All overhead power lines shall be considered energized until proven otherwise. Contact the owner of the lines to determine the voltage of the lines and request the lines to be de-energized and grounded. Never accept working near an energized line unless it's not feasible to de-energize it. These are the minimum safety requirements. You need to eliminate the danger before start working. How to eliminate the danger? Number one, by avoidance. Find out if the work really has to be carried out under or near overhead lines and can't be done somewhere else. Make sure materials such as heaps or spoils are not placed near overhead lines, and temporary structures such as scaffolds or long ladders are erected outside safe clearance distances. Number two is diversion. Arrange for overhead lines to be diverted away from the work area, or isolation. Arrange for lines to be made dead while the work is being done. But in some cases, you may need to use a suitable combination of these measures, particularly where overhead lines passes over permanent work areas. If the danger cannot be eliminated, you should manage the risk by controlling access to and work beneath overhead power lines. Step number two is controlling the access. Where there is no scheduled work or requirement for access under the lines, barriers should be erected at the correct clearance distance away from the line to prevent close approach. The safe clearance distance should be ascertained from the utility owner. You need to follow the safe system of work in all cases to make safe clearance distances and how the barriers need to be constructed. Where there is a requirement to pass beneath the lines, defined passageways should be made. The danger area should be made as small as possible by restricting the width of the passageway to the minimum needed for the safe crossing of plants and equipment. The passageway should Cross the route of the overhead line at right angles if possible. Remember, if work beneath live overhead power lines cannot be avoided, barriers, goalposts, and warning notices should be provided. Where fieldwork is taking place, it may be impractical to erect barriers and goalposts around the overhead lines. These are more appropriate for use at gateways, on tracks, and at access points to form yards. These all are the safety requirements to control the work, to control the hazard, to keep the workers, to keep the equipment, to keep the project and the organization away from the fatal or catastrophic incidents because of high voltage overhead power lines. Let us discuss now the safety precautions that may also be needed to manage the risk. An important point is clearance. The safe clearance required beneath the overhead lines should be found by contacting the distribution network operator or the service provider or the utility owner. Point number two, exclusion. Vehicles, plant, machinery, equipment, or materials that could reach beyond the safe clearance distance should not be taken near to the overhead power lines. Dear friends and fellows, you are on the platform of Safety First Life. Today we are talking about the dangers and hazards involved with overhead power lines. If we are working in a construction area and there is the crossing for overhead power lines, how to avoid electrical disasters. If you are interested to know the power line clearance requirements, refer to NFPA 70E for safe approach distances. For your kind information, for lines 50 kilovolt or less, the operator must keep all equipment parts and personnel at least 10 feet away. For lines above 50 kV, this distance increases by 4 inches for each kV over 50 kV. Determine your safe working clearance. The closest you can place equipment or personnel without crossing the buffer zone. In any case, you will not jump inside the buffer zone. You should keep yourself and your equipment away from the clearance distance. And you have to maintain the distance as per the legal specifications mentioned against as per the capacity or the magnitude of the voltage. You need to implement two barrier control systems to maintain effective standoff distances. Examples include number one, use trained, dedicated spotters that maintain radio contact with operator. Ensure spotters understand hand signals. Use of radios is preferred for communication purposes. Number two, use physical barriers that prevent equipment from intrusion, insulation blankets, etc. Number three, use stakes, cones, and painted lines to remind operators of demarcation lines. There might be other controls needed. Examples of other controls are number one, procure and use remote measurement techniques and equipment to determine actual clearance distances. Number two, use reflective materials to enhance visual identification of spotter by equipment operators. Number three, disable equipment functions to prevent rotation, elevation, extension, or movement of components to prevent inadvertent contact. Number four, have a brief job site meeting to discuss the planned work as it relates to the power lines. Discuss topics such as the use of long-handled tools and equipment, raised dump trucks, backhoes, etc. that could come in contact with the lines. Consider the two barrier controls. Number five, prohibit work when environmental conditions warrant fog, precipitation, smoke, darkness, etc. Number six, only use non-conductive ladders and materials handling equipment. Aluminum ladders and metal scaffolds or frames are efficient conductors of electricity, and this should not be used near. are in the close proximity of overhead power lines. This can be dangerous. Number 7, consider grounding mobile equipment. Number 8, avoid storing materials under or near overhead power lines. And number 9, always stay alert when working near power lines. Monitor actions of others and stop work if required to reduce risk of contact. These are the considerations, but very important if you are working near, under, or in the close proximity of overhead power lines. Dear friends and fellows, you are on the platform of Safety First Life. Today we are talking about overhead power lines, dangers and hazards, risks, and the safety precautions needed to work safely under, near, or in the close proximity. One aspect is modifications. Vehicles such as cranes, excavators, and telehandlers should be modified by the addition of suitable physical restraints so that they cannot reach beyond the safe clearance distances. Measures should be put in place to ensure these restraints are effective and cannot be altered or tampered with. Another option is maintenance. Operators of high machinery should be instructed not to carry out any work on top of the machinery near overhead power lines, even if it is required, or it is a routine matter, or an urgent piece of maintenance. The most important point is, in all cases, the basic control is supervision, access for plant and materials, and the working of plant should be under the direct supervision of a suitable, competent, appointed person to ensure that safety precautions are observed. Dear friends and fellows, let us discuss now how to use machinery and equipment safely near overhead power lines. Moving equipment or machinery when extensions are raised could bring it into contact with overhead power lines. Reduce risk by making sure machines can operate safely near overhead power lines. For example, number 1, retract the booms of telescopic handlers and keep them close to the ground when the vehicle is moving. Number 2, lower grand tank lids and ensure that unloading organ combines are stored and not in the extended unloading position. Number 3, use sprayers with horizontally folding booms and never fold vertical sprayer booms on the move. Number 4, fit shorter radio areas and beacons. Reposition or remove existing ones on high machines so they cannot cause danger. Take care not to damage poles and stays. Number 5, remember, risks increase at dusk, in darkness, or in poor visibility when it becomes harder for machine operators to see overhead power lines. So, in this environment, the long boom machinery is not allowed to be used if the environmental conditions are not suitable and favorable. Dear friends and fellows, you know very well the crane is the most common type of equipment which most often contacts overhead power lines. When contact happens, the rigger or ground worker is most often electrocuted 90% of time because they are involved in rigging, slinging, or maybe tagging. Let us make a quick overview for safe practices of operating cranes and mobile equipment near overhead power lines. Number 1, make it a habit to look up before you unload or load a crane from a truck or lobet. Make sure there are no overhead lines before you start. Number 2, operate equipment at a slower than normal rate in the vicinity of power lines. Number 3, exercise caution near long spans of overhead power lines, since wind can cause the power lines to sway literally and reduce the clearance between the crane and the power line. Number 4, mark safe routes where equipment must repeatedly travel beneath power lines. Number 5, exercise caution when traveling over uneven ground that could cause the crane weave or bob into power lines. Number 6, keep all personnel on ground well away from the crane whenever it is close to power lines. And number 7, prohibit persons from touching the crane or its load until a signal person indicates that it is safe to do so. Dear friends and fellows, safety training series is ongoing on the topic of electrical safety. In today's training session, we are talking about safe working near overhead electrical power lines. Until now, we are talking about how to prevent or avoid contact with overhead electrical power lines. With all respect, with all precautions, safety controls, and by the implementation of safe system of work. In the case if your equipment makes contact with the power line, what action is needed then? What to do? Let us understand now this important point. Stay on the equipment and wait until the line is de-energized by the power company. This instruction is for the operator. If you must leave the equipment, such as in a fire, jump clear and attempt to land with both feet together. Don't touch any part of the equipment when contacting the ground. Shuffle away from equipment in small steps while keeping feet together. In this way, you can keep yourself safe and away from the danger. In any case, don't allow anyone on ground to come near or touch the machine or the equipment. Warn personnel to stay away from the machine. And lastly, never touch a person who is in contact with a live power line, even he is your best friend or a brother. Call for help and get power line de-energized. Otherwise, in the case, if you will show extra sympathy or boldness, you will become the second victim and you will be no more. And that's all for now. Training session, electrical safety, part 2 is over. If you have any question, please ask in the comment section. Thanks for watching and don't forget to like, comment and share the video. Hope to see you soon with a new HSC tutorial. Until then, take care, good luck and goodbye.